Hi guys, Chris Pies here. This is the little addendum to the classroom for Series 10 for the Hockenheim race, but we're having a little bit more extra classroom because we wanted to talk about something a little bit different than just track walks on top of track walks. And this time, what we're going to talk about kind of the sports psychology or the mental aspects of racing and what we can do as drivers to help us get the most out of the time that we've got to one practice, and then also how we can set ourselves up for success when we participate in races, especially longer races. But we can also talk about sprint races as well, really short races. The mental aspect, racing in general, a lot like a lot of sports, is, I would say, more mental than not. Yeah, there's a physical component, especially in real life racing, with the physical exertion that a body goes through with all the G forces and being in a race car in general. But in sim racing, we're not subjected to those kind of G forces. We do need to have the endurance to be able to potentially move and concentrate. But the majority of the effort when we race in sim is up here. It's the mental aspect. And whenever you're racing, whenever you find yourself, I'm working up a sweat or something like that. It's not because we're physically exerting ourselves to any significant extent. It's because the pressure that we're under, or the amount of mental effort that we are exerting when we get into really tight duels, when we get under pressure because we're doing really well in a race that we didn't expect to. But the mental aspect is what's causing us to exert ourselves, and that's where that when we say, oh man, I that race caused me to sweat a lot, it's because of the mental. It's the pressure and the mental aspect of it is what is stressing us out, stressing our bodies out. So if we can work on trying to reason through why that's occurring, potentially we can limit it, or not limit it but control it. So when we talk about the psychology of kind of sports and what we're doing, the thing I'll say is, we only have so much mental capacity to do any kind of task. And there's two general ideas behind the way our brain needs to operate to perform such a task. You've got the one aspect of your brain that is going to be doing automated tasks. That's the kind of stuff like blinking your eyes, breathing, walking down the street, things like that. Things that you do not have to think about at all, but your body and your brain does it automatically. And then you've got the other aspect of your brain, which is the active thought process of calculating a task. So if we equate it to walking, let's say, if you're just walking down the street, you're not thinking about putting one foot in front of the other, moving contracting your muscles in such a way that enables your legs to move and to actually cause you to amble down the street. But if you're thinking, I need to walk down the street to go check the mail, the thought process of actively doing the walking to go check the mail, checking the mail is what your brain is consumed with, or is what it's thinking about. And then also might be thinking about other things, how your day was, what's for dinner that night. What I've been really looking at that Porsche GT4 RS. Should I go ahead and buy it? That's what your brain is focusing on. But the act of walking is so second nature that it doesn't require much of our brain capacity to be able to do. So, racing is very similar. When you first start racing, especially when you start learning a new track, a new car, a new combination, or like that, or something like that, your brain is consumed with driving that car and not wrecking. So, driving through turn one, driving through turn two, driving this particular car quickly without spinning and crashing and stuff like that. Your brain is trying to learn how to walk effectively. So you are actively thinking about contracting certain muscles, if we go back to the walking metaphor, and trying to walk down the street thinking about every aspect of doing that, which leaves you unable or incapable to devote portions of your brain to thinking about, what's for dinner, or that GT4 RS or something like that is not involved with walking whatsoever. As you get better at a practice, or as you get better doing a task, it becomes what we call second nature, right? And so as we get more comfortable with racing, with a car, with a track, all of a sudden we don't have to think about the break points. We don't have to think about the line going through the S's. It starts to happen second nature. It starts to happen automatically because we've done it so many times before. Once we get to that point, then our brain can be the mental capacity that we have more RAM, so to speak, to use a computer idea. We have more RAM available for other thoughts. Those other thoughts can be used to help navigate around the track that isn't actually used for driving. So when we get to that state where the driving is second nature, we are now able to think about where am I in this race? When do I need to stop for fuel? I'm coming up on these cars that are 2 seconds up in front of me, but it looks like I'm catching them by 2/10 a lap. It looks like I'm going to catch them in about 5 to 10 laps. Where do I want to catch them? Do I want to catch them in the hairpin? Do I want to catch them in the S's? What do I need to do in order to effectuate the pass? How are they driving? It looks like that when they go through the S's, they're not full throttle like I am. Their line isn't as good, and I seem to be making up more time in there, but they seem to be faster coming out of the hairpin. Your brain can be used, your mental capacity, your RAM can be used to think about how to race rather than actually racing. So you can start thinking about those things about your walk on the way to the mailbox instead of the actual physical walking there. And only when you get to that point, that comfort level behind the car on the track, can you really effectively race and really challenge. I'm not saying you can't race if you're still thinking about brake markers and thinking about turn-in points and thinking about how to manipulate, everything we talked about in the track walk. I'm just saying you're not going to be as effective because your brain is still, portion of your brain and your RAM is being used up by actually driving the car. So the best drivers that are out there, the ones that are most successful, will tell you, if you ask any one of them, how do you keep driving consistently, or how do you keep driving lap times that are on top of each other? They're going to say, it's automatic. It feels, I'm not actually thinking about it very much. And that's because it's become like walking. It's become second nature to them, and they can focus on the actual aspect of racing. A really good way to test to see where you are from a mental side about your comfort level in doing racing is to pop onto Discord or have a conversation with somebody that's not about racing at all. So talk about your day, talk about something else that excites you other than racing, but have a reasonable conversation where they ask you questions, you answer questions, you ask them questions, but you have a conversation with somebody while you're turning hot laps in a car. If you can do that, then you are at that point where the racing and the actual driving is second nature, and your RAM and your brain can be used to focus on other aspects of driving. Another way to be able to do it is being able to, if you're turning lap times that are within tenths of each other consistently, like if you look at my lap times for this particular thing, these were practice sessions, but look at this second stint that I did. I mean, it's only 4 laps, but whatever. I did a 40.2, 40.0, 40.0, 40.0, right? It's the exact same thing over and over and over again. And if you get that consistency down, that's not because you're thinking through it to get to there, because the more you think about driving, the less consistent you're going to be. If it's automatic, then that's where the consistency starts to come from, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but that's at least from what I've found. So that's another way to kind of test yourself, whether or not you are able to do that. So yeah, we need to get to the point where driving is second nature. And the way that happens is, fortunately, unfortunately, depending on the way you look at it, is through repetition, doing the same thing over and over, doing drills, doing whatever you can to get to that point where you're very comfortable with the car. I've got thousands of hours in iRacing across multiple different cars, across all the tracks that are out that I own, and et cetera, et cetera. There's very rarely a situation where I get thrown into a car that I have to actually think about how to drive the car. But that is a culmination of practice. And that's what you're kind of working towards. The good news is the more you do it, the more everything kind of builds on top of each other. You're building a foundation, and then you're building the house on top of that foundation. And once you've got that foundation and the walls built to the house, every other aspect of it, whether you change the car or you change the track, you don't have to relearn and rebuild the foundation every time. You can just kind of add on to it, so to speak. So it all kind of just builds and builds and builds. So I'll leave that there for a second to let it kind of simmer. Are there any questions about this? Does that make any sense? Or does anybody have any questions about or want to challenge it too, I mean, that's fine too. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just based on experience of doing, frankly, almost professional golf for such a long part of my life, where I had a sports psychologist, and some of the mental things that we would talk about in the golf world, I find a lot of similarities to driving as well. No? Okay. So the other aspect I wanted to talk about too was, how do we, knowing that we need to get to the situation where we need to get to the point where driving is automatic and we can focus on other things when we're actually racing, is we got to think of the race in the context of what it is. Which that means is if it's an hour-long race, that is going to be driven very differently than if it's a 15-minute race. If it's a 6-hour race, it's going to be driven very different from an hour race. And we need to focus on what is important and what is not important. A lot of times people get really involved and really hooked up with the fastest lap time. And it's because it's everywhere. Whenever you look at like the results of any kind of racing, whether it be in real life or in iRacing, boom, one of the numbers that you see in addition to where everybody finished is their fastest lap time. And you can even see they'll color it in purple for who has the fastest lap time. Watch F1. They even give a world championship point to the person that has the fastest lap time, so far as they're a point, so long as they get a point in the race. Everybody is consumed with that fastest lap time. And I will admit it myself. When I do my real life racing in these endurance races that last 8+ hours, I'm looking at the fastest lap time of the car and say, oh, that's the pace of the car. But that's not the case. That's one lap in a vacuum that car did with one driver. That is not the overall pace of the car. Races are won not by fastest lap, but by the fastest average lap time. So if you go out there and you do a banger of a lap and you burn up your tires trying to achieve that lap, and then you can't get within 3 seconds of it because you have no tire left, what's the point of the fastest lap at that point? So instead of trying to focus on fastest lap or looking at other drivers and seeing what their fastest lap is and saying, oh man, I'm a second off that pace, instead of saying I'm a second off their pace, that's true for that one lap in that one vacuum, say, okay, they did a lap that was 1 second faster than my fastest lap, but I need to consider what their entire stint is. And if you look at VRS, try to look at their data and see that they're only doing 3 laps at a time, 7 laps at a time, and then they're stopping, right? Well, they're going out there trying to bust out fastest laps, frankly, and that's not effective practice. They're not practicing like they will race. You're going to do 30 laps in a stint, and the goal is to get those 30 laps into the shortest amount of time over the 30 laps than instead of just one fast lap. So focus on being consistent, focus on still being quick. I mean, obviously it is a race, you still need to go quickly, but if you're consistent, what you do is repeatable all the time, and you have a good average lap time, you'll find that you will beat some folks that have fastest laps or fastest laps than you've turned. And it's all because of averages. So think about that instead of thinking about and getting involved in those fast laps. Tire conservation is a real big deal, as I see my car just absolutely sliding off the road right there. This over the course of the hour, we need to really worry about our tires here at like Hockenheim. And so keeping the tires under us, keeping our car under us. Let's say that we are capable of doing 39s, 39-second laps, at least a few of them. Does that really benefit us if we do 3 39s, 4 39s at the beginning of the race, and then the rest of our laps are 41s? Where if we don't do those 39s in the beginning, if we focus on maintaining the car and doing what we need to keep the tires available for the rest of the race, we do 40s, but we do 40s for the entire time. We may actually end up having a faster average lap time than somebody that went out there and just started doing bangers. That also goes with like things like fuel economy and fuel usage. We do have to have a pit stop, and then that pit stop, there's fuel being added to the car. If we go a little bit slower or maintain a reasonable pace while saving fuel, while everybody else is going full chat and burning a lot of fuel, we're going to sit in pit lane for less because less fuel has to be added to our car to go the same distance, and we make up time there. There's been plenty of times where I've followed behind somebody else because I knew it was going to be very difficult for me to get past them on pace alone, in the way that the track is constructed, that instead I decided to sit behind them, sacrifice maybe a couple tenths a lap that I would be able to do in clean air, and just focused on saving fuel. And then I spent 3 seconds less in the pit stop than they did because I was saving fuel, and I come out 3 seconds ahead of them once the fuel, once the pit stops and pit cycles finished. So I complete the pass through pit lane. Don't even have to risk coming side to side with somebody, contact, anything like that. I'm by them before they even knew it. So going back and trying to bring this all full circle, the only way I can even think about those kind of strategies, think about where I need to be during the middle of the race, is to have the mental RAM, to have the mental capacity to be able to think of that strategy on the fly, because I already know how to drive the car, and I'm driving the car via second nature, and I'm not actively thinking about it. So anyway, that's just a crash course and kind of the idea about thinking about racing and where you need to be in order to be really effective when you race. And then also to try to make sure you're focusing on the things that matter and don't get caught up in the things that don't matter. And if you do that, and if you take it to heart, you'll probably find yourself being more successful, at the very least being more consistent. Mark asks, what makes you pick strategies one over another, assuming you have the capacity to think about it? Experience, I'd say. So whenever I come into a race, I will think about, okay, so let's change it up a little bit. When we talk, if you ever watch Formula One, right? All of the teams have strategies that they've already basically simmed out. And they usually call them plans: plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever. And you'll actually occasionally hear on the radio when they come on, confirm plan A, confirm plan A. They've already thought it out, and they've got teams of engineers that, have so many different permutations, and they have all this data coming out. There's no way a driver could, one, know all of it, and two, have the mental capacity while driving the car to even consider that kind of stuff, except for maybe Fernando Alonso, which is hilarious. So as an individual, we need to have a plan going in. Okay, so our plan would be, okay, on this particular lap or this particular race, I want to drive the car till empty, and then I'm going to pit somewhere around the 40-minute mark, 45-minute mark, or something like that, and then I'll drive the final stint like that. So that's my plan A. But as the race starts to unfold based on the cars that are around you, you need to have the ability to adapt to it. So again, if I come up to a car, or I'm having trouble passing a car on pace alone, and I realize that really early in the stint that I'm just not going to get by them based on the way they're driving unless they make a big mistake, then I will go into fuel save mode. I will go into sitting behind them, lifting and coasting, taking it easy. I'm saving my tires and I'm saving fuel in the car while maintaining the pace because they're pulling me along with the draft. And that way I know that when I stop, I'll be able to pass them. If I don't have anybody around me and I'm able to run full, qualifying or race laps with no impediment, I might take a completely different strategy. I might say, hey, I'm going to go as hard as I possibly can, and I'm going to run this thing all the way till dry, and I'm going to hope that my pace alone will enable me to pass other people, or catch up to them, especially if there's people behind me that I'm trying to get away from. I don't want them to have my draft. I'm going to drive harder and try to get away from them. So when we do pit, I've got a little bit of a gap. So when I come out, I'll ensure that I stay in front of them. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all we can do with the kinds of racing that we have. Obviously, if you ever do endurance racing and you have a live steward and they can throw yellow flags, and you have a team, that's a completely different story. You've got strategy in terms of what happens if a yellow comes out now. Are we pitting? Are we not pitting? But typically in that, you're in a team format and you got somebody that is not driving that is thinking about the strategy at any given time. So, but a great question, Mark. Any other questions?
Hey, Chris, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
I just wanted to mention just some things that I'm working on right now, some things that I've run into to get back to sort of the psychology of racing, because I think it's really, really critical. I found myself sort of stuck at a certain point. I'm doing certain lap times. I'm not progressing the way I would really like to. And so I decided to alter my my strategy of practicing and really setting goals for myself. And this is actually at this track. This is the first time I'm really exercising this, and I think it's working. So what I'm concentrating on every time I go out to practice, I'm concentrating on my vision, looking far ahead. It's really, really, really helpful, you know. And I'm not stressing out over lap times or anything else. It's just I really want to get to the point where I can get into the flow state with this track and feel really, really comfortable out there. And so vision and just placement of the car, and those are the things that I'm really working on, and I'm finding that to be very, very helpful.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point in terms of effective practice, right? Um, None of us, well, not I won't say none of us. Some of us have a lot of time to practice. Robbie Prescott, but most of us don't have that kind of time to just go out there and bang labs over and over and over and over again. And so, what time we do have to be able to practice, we need to make sure that it's effective practice, is what I call it. Going out there and just mindly turning laps, it's good to become familiar with the car and the general feel. It's kind of going towards what we were talking about at the beginning of this, but getting that next level, getting past the plateau of improvement, um, we need to focus on certain aspects, and having that ability and identifying something that we can focus on in order to really focus on a certain aspect of practice can really hone us to get good at a certain skill. That looking forward is a great technique, and it's in general. I think that amateur drivers don't do enough. Vision is incredibly important in racing. The car will go, and your hands and feet will drive the car to wherever you're looking. If you're looking at the apex, you're going to drive the car to the apex. If you're looking at track out, you're going to drive to track out. If you're looking at a car that's sideways in the middle of the road, you're going to drive into the side of the car in the middle of the road through target fixation. So vision is incredibly important, and recognizing that you want to work on that as a practice tool is effective practice. I'm focusing on something I want to improve. This is what my main focus is. I'm not worried about lap times. I'm worried about improving that skill. That's good. Another thing you could do is I'm going to focus on working on my braking technique and brake modulation going through corners. I could care less how fast I'm going through corners or my line. What I'm focused on is learning how to brake the cup car at threshold without locking up and remaining in control and trail braking into the entry of the corner. And that's all I'm going to focus on for the next 30 minutes. That's effective practice. You're really honing in on a specific aspect of your driving that you can see tangible results by working on it. Going out there and trying to eat the elephant in one bite. I'm going to go run Hockenheim in a GT3R. I've never driven this car on this track, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to just start driving the entire track. It's too big. It's too much of a mental task to be able to tackle. And as a result, you're going to have to turn 300 laps to be able to approach practice like that. And most of us don't have 300 laps to be able to do that. So, small bite-sized chunks, taking sectors or certain corners. Another thing you can do, like say for Hockenheim, I'm going to focus on turn 2 hairpin, and I'm going to focus on the final double right-hander corner. And those are going to be my primary focuses during this next 30-minute track session. And that's all I'm going to do. And if you do that, it enables you to, around the lap, to really focus on those couple of corners until you feel like you really nailed them down. And then once you feel like you're good on that, you move it to 2 other corners on opposite sides of the track, and you do that. iRacing has an amazing tool that just came out. When I say just came out, I think it came out earlier this year, called Active Reset, where you can set a point anywhere on the track with a button, look in your bindings, set a point, and then you drive through whatever sector or whatever corner you want to focus on practicing. And then you set another button, which is your reset button. And so you set the point on one, and then on the other button, it will reset you back to that point you set. So if you wanted to focus on the hairpin here, you could set the active reset button to just before the brake zone. run through the hairpin, see what you did, hit the other button to reset it again, and it will put a marker for the segment time right when you hit that reset button, and it will put you right where you put that first point at, and you can run it again and run it again and run it again. So you're running the exact same corner over and over and over and over again, and you're getting segment times, and you can see if you're improving or not on based on seconds, based on time. And you can work on different things without having to do the entire lap to get back to that same corner. It really helps hone in on certain distinct aspects of driving a track and learning a track if you really want to work on something like that. So try that as well. That it's a really good tool that iRacing has given us.
Yeah, the other thing that I've done is to limit my practice time. So I'm not putting in like a lot of time. I'm putting in like a half an hour, and then I'll go back and review. You know, how am I hitting these lines? Am I using the track effectively? Am I using all of the track? And just go through that whole review process, and be very critical of what I'm doing out there. And then I know, okay, this is what I got to work on. I think you have to be very critical, very analytical, but not overthink it. Also, get into that state where you're comfortable out there, and that you're using all the track. And like I said, my biggest thing has been vision, focusing on looking as far ahead as I possibly can. I think it makes a big difference, most certainly at this track.
Absolutely. And not everybody can practice, not every practice, a way of practice works for everybody. Some people have trouble being analytical. Some people have trouble being hypercritical with themselves. And that's another benefit of having a coach, right? A coach brings a couple of things. They bring a third party person in to help you do a task. It can always be daunting to try to take and do a task on your own, and a coach is there to be a friend, a mentor, but also to help you through it. They can having a team to tackle a problem always makes a problem feel less daunting, or practice in general. But a coach can do exactly what you just said. They can be hypercritical of you because they are not you, right? And the people that take advantage of potentially having a coach or having someone like that can point out things and offer criticisms, not to be mean or anything, but criticisms to make you better and to offer suggestions on how to get better, can really improve and help having help your progress and be efficient with your progress. And Mark just said it. A second pair of eyes is key to seeing my own blind spots. Absolutely. We do it in our professional careers. I'd say there's very few people that ever work alone. We all work on teams, and we all have people and colleagues that we work with to do what we need to do. Why is racing or sim racing any different? And the more eyes, the more people that can help you out with it will speed up that process of learning. So take advantage of it. As I said before at the end of the previous classroom, PCA sim racing, we're here for you guys. There are a lot of people that are instructors in Discord that are absolutely willing to help out. Take advantage of it. There's a lot of people that have really have taken advantage of it and have improved immensely with the help of a lot of the expertise that's here. And there's a lot of people that are not just fast for PCA, but are just fast in general against anybody. And they're volunteering their time and offering it as a resource for the club. So take advantage of it. People that are much faster than I am. And I'm self-taught, and while that can be great, and I can say, oh, I'm self-taught and yada yada and all that fun stuff, at the end of the day, if I would have had somebody that I could have learned at, I probably could have learned much quicker than what I've done now. And even then, I've probably have built some bad habits that it would be very hard for me to break because I had no formal education when it comes to racing. So use that, do what you can with that, and please take advantage of it.
Good point. Thanks.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, like I said, this is just something that I wanted to kind of get out there for people that were interested in learning more about it, or at least talking about it. And you know, we could always have modules like this that are outside of the track walk, because while the track walks are great, at the end of the day, if you can't implement it properly, it doesn't really do you any good. So, you know, racing is so much more than hitting a brake marker point, turning in at a certain point, and driving a certain line. That's just like the bare minimum to be able to try to race. That's like time trial stuff. Racing is so much more than that. And in order to get real satisfaction from actual racing, I think that it needs to go beyond track walks, and that's what makes it fun. Mark asked another question. What's your approach to being consistent? Is it practice or mental discipline? I'd say it's a little bit of both on my end, my personal way I do it. Like I said, I've got thousands of hours in this, in iRacing or just racing sims in general. I've been doing it all my life since I was a little kid. I've always been doing driving games and such back in the Gran Turismo days. But it's that foundation. Whenever you practice, you're not practicing in a vacuum. You're practicing and you're improving your skill overall. And so those thousands of hours that I've put in have built the foundation and built the walls of the house. And now when I practice, when I jump into a car, I'm already at a certain level, even if I've never been in that car and I've never seen the track. And it's relatively quick for me to try to get up to what I would consider my speed. Where I tend to struggle, and this is where I'm being hypercritical of myself. I tend not to practice enough, and it's because I'm reasonably quick with very little practice, because of all that time I've put in, and it tends to I sometimes can get comfortable with that. And when I get comfortable with that, I say, oh, I feel like I'm in a good shape, or I'm in a good position, and then I'll leave it at that. Where competitors may be going that extra mile and getting those extra tenths or something like that. So I have to be really adamant and really focused on putting in effective practice to make myself go and push beyond what I'm comfortable with. The other thing that for me, what I've done, which has made, in my opinion, made me a really effective racer, is I drive anything under the sun. If you look at my history in VRS in terms of like what I've driven, the data packs and stuff, or not the data packs, but my past drives, I drive everything from 1987 NASCARs to supercars to GT3s to open wheel to prototypes. I will drive anything. And the lessons I learned from different cars that have different nuances, they all can build on each other. So, you know, driving a Miata quickly, there's things that I've learned in how to drive a Miata quickly that I bring towards driving a GT3. Where if somebody never drives a Miata, they don't have that same toolbox, so to speak. So I think my benefit or my advantage is that I have a lot of tools in my toolbox because I drive everything under the sun. I may not be the fastest in a GT3 against somebody that only drives GT3s, but when it comes down to it, if you put me in a long race with somebody, and that's why I like endurance racing, I can use and lean on toolboxes that other people might not have, or tools in the toolbox that other people might not have, because they haven't driven so many different things. So that's how I tend to approach it, if that answers the question. It was a little bit of a ramble, so I apologize. All right, I don't want to talk you guys' ears off. If you have any other questions, thanks, Mark. He's saying cranking 40s like clockwork is very impressive and consistent. Yeah, but 40s isn't going to cut it in the pro. I need to be in 39s, frankly, to have a shot. So we'll see how that goes. But no, I've done Nürburgring races where the lap times are like above 8 minutes, and I think a stint is like 7 or 8 laps. And I've cranked out. I think there was one endurance race where I cranked out 8 laps in a stint with traffic, and they were all within a second of themselves, over 8 minutes. So each lap is over 8 minutes long, and every lap was within a second of each other, which is something that I'm super proud of. I like to be consistent. That's what I really pride myself on. And so that one was like my highlight of my iRacing career. So anyway, if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to anybody. I'm happy to talk one-on-one with folks. I'm happy to do coaching if you want that too. And just chat racing in general. I live and breathe this stuff. I love it. I do it virtually. I do it in real life. And so to the extent that I can help other people learn this passion and love it like I do, I will do it. I'll talk your ear off when it comes to racing. So just come ask. But other than that, get out there, get on track. Like I said, there's a bunch of different servers that have gone up for EDEs. Get out there and practice and go out there and race. And the big takeaway or the thing I will leave you with is practice like you're going to perform. So if you're going to go race wheel to wheel with people, you need to practice racing wheel to wheel with people. Just being by yourself on a track doing time trials or hot lapping is not going to prepare you to race wheel to wheel. So make sure you get out there with other cars, use AI, go do official sessions if you have to, learn how you perform using racecraft with other cars in your vicinity, and learn how to be a racer. Don't learn how to be a hot lapper. If racing is what the goal is ultimately, practice like you will perform. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, guys, and good luck for the next couple weeks.